Are girls as good as boys at computers?
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. We could pretty much do anything they could do. There shouldn't be a stereotype about it
there
at
shouldn't
all.
be like a barrier between our genders just because we're that gender. It's all equal.
A coder is a person that creates things on the computer by using a language.
If I had you draw a picture or describe to me what they look like, computer science programmer, what would they look like?
Glasses. Like my dad goes to work in Oakland and he has a computer. He just works every day on his computer.
Is that pretty cool? Or is that not so cool?
It's cool because I get to go down a slide in his office.
Do you think it'd be fun to be a computer science person?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Because you're always on a computer and it sometimes could get a little boring.
And that image in your mind, is that a man or a woman?
Man.
The White House released a report that there will be 1.4 million jobs that are going to be opened by 2020 in the computing-related fields. And at the current rate, less than 29% of them are going to be filled by Americans, and less than 3% of that 29% are going to be women.
In the next 5 years, this country is going to produce about 3 times as many jobs for software engineers as it is producing new computer science majors. This whole industry is going to start to run out of gas if we're not producing enough computer science talent.
It's so urgent that we get more people to have the skills for coding and making, because we have so many different problems to solve in the world. And the industry really needs more diversity so we can make the broad set of products that this world deserves.
And I really think that this is a Rosie the Riveter moment, because the jobs are here and we don't have the workers to fill them.
Code. Debugging the gender gap.
A program is a series of instructions.
If, then, instruction is the real thing that separates a computer from a straightforward calculator, it can make little decisions within itself.
It is the program that is the key to the computer's effectiveness and versatility. Through the program, man communicates with the machine.
Coding's magic. Coding is behind everything. Your pocket is full of code. It's got your phone in it. And so it's really like, coders should be everybody at this point. There's so many exciting things you can do. You can make music, you can do fashion, you can do all kinds of things with code. We're kind of on the precipice of everyone being a coder.
Basically, it's writing a set of instructions. And those instructions are what a computer follows. You put all those together and you have email and you have iTunes and you have all kinds of cool things.
Regardless if you want a job in this field or not, I think learning something about computer science is pretty important. I think it's an important life skill in the same way that everyone should know a little bit about law and everyone should know a little bit about economics. You probably should know a little bit about computer science.
Turn right.
Everything from your navigation system in your car to the way we think about credit card fraud, it's all radically changed behind the scenes.
Enter your passcode.
There's no one way to do coding. It's about problem solving in a very precise way, but also in a creative way. You can write some code once. Hundreds of millions of people or more can be accessing the products that you've built.
Yell.
You can combine code with anything you love and you can have a job doing it. I loved art and I loved coding and now I get to make movies. So if you take our film Brave and our main character Merida, and she's got this huge head of red hair. And to make those curls move the right way, you have to consider the physics of things. There's so many different algorithms, like thousands of them that we use all the time. And then you code up those equations. And then for all the shots in the movie, the code crunches the numbers and takes into account things like wind and gravity and whether Merida's climbing a mountain or riding a horse and does it brush her shoulder and all these things. And what you get is this lovely teenager that's fiery in spirit and it sort of sells her personality and her hair moves the right way.
I am Merida and I'll be shooting for my own hand! What are you doing?
I worked at Pixar for 17 years. I have a computer science degree from Harvard, but had always done a lot of art, and so kind of worked my way from technical into creative. For me, being a teenager, I think of it as sort of one foot being in the world of being a kid and one foot in the world of being an adult and figuring out who you are away from your family and sort of coming into your own, what's your voice, all those things.
Merida! Curse this dress! Merida, stop this!
So this idea of Merida as this teenager and she's trying to find her way in the world brought me to this time period in my life in 8th grade. And there's this class and it's called Power Mechanics. And the idea was that you take a lawnmower that's been donated to the local hardware store that doesn't work anymore, and you take it apart and you put it back together with the idea that at the end maybe it would work, hopefully. I was definitely the only girl in there, but it wasn't like I turned into the school pariah or anything, so it was okay. At the end of the semester, we roll the lawnmowers out, and I just happened to be the last one in line, and so I'm watching as these guys are pulling the string on the lawnmower, and nothing's happening, and it's silent except for all of this sort of like frustration going on. The teacher finally gets to me and puts the gas in, and I take this deep breath, and I just pulled as hard as I could. And the lawnmower like roars to life. And I look up and there's this whole line of guys and they're just looking at me with this shocked look on their face. And then I ran around the football field mowing the lawn, you know? I think role models are hugely important. You're not going to imagine you can do something unless you see someone that you can connect with that's doing the same thing. When it's a woman doing that, it's easier to make that connection. At a certain point, you realize, oh, I do actually know what I'm doing. And I'm actually pretty good at this, and I belong in this room.
Gloria Steinem says that women have always been an equal part of the past, just not an equal part of history, which is the case, of course, here in computer science and technology.
Women were the pioneer programmers. They've been written out of history, unfortunately, in many cases, but they were the ones who first understood that instructing the machine was more important than the hardware of the machine. One of the first women pioneers in computing was Ada Lovelace, Lord Byron's daughter.
She's often considered to be the first computer programmer. Very often we trace the history of computing back to a guy named Charles Babbage, who in England in the 1820s built some machines that look like a modern computer. Ada Lovelace was a mathematician who wrote a first and very important description of Babbage's analytical engine.
She really envisioned how punch cards, which instructed the mechanical looms that were driving industrial England, that they could be used by her friend Charles Babbage's difference in analytical engines so that they could do more than just numbers. They could be computers. They could do words and pictures and music and patterns. The first computers were built for special purposes. Breaking the German wartime codes, calculating a missile trajectory, and if you wanted to reprogram to do another problem, you had to unplug some cables and do some switches. And the women were in charge of doing the plugging and unplugging of the cables. They'd look at the diagram of the computer and figure out how would we move the cables to reprogram it. It did not seem like the most important work, but it took a good mathematical mind.
The designers thought that this would be an easy job, that the building of the machine would be the most difficult task, and then you would have a scientist who would define the problem, and these women would just be coding it. They'd be translating it from human language into machine language. It turns out that coding was quite difficult, and so these women played a very active role in defining what a computer could do.
They had this equipment and somebody had to figure out what to do with it. Well, that's always a good job to give to the women. Do something with this, make it work. And you know, in the early days of hardware and software, that was kind of what it was like. Hardware would put stuff as much as they could with it, and they'd give it to software people, do something with it.
I don't think software engineering as an industry is a meritocracy. I think it's a great ideal that engineering holds itself to, but it's very far from being that. I'm really excited that there is a lot more conversation around diversity in engineering and diversity in tech now than even there was a couple of years ago, because I think the first step is that awareness. I went to the conference in October of 2013 and been there listening to a few people speaking about the lack of women, how bad the numbers were, how the numbers were declining, but nobody was talking about the actual numbers that they had or whether any of these tactics that they were deploying were helping with the numbers. And so when I came back from the conference, I issued this call to action that people could count up the number of female software engineers as well as total software engineers within their companies and submit it to this project, and we could aggregate it into one place. Before, it was more or less an open secret that diversity was a problem within tech, but when companies started putting these numbers out there with full diversity disclosure reports, it became very obvious for people outside the industry to look at those and say, wow, there really is a problem. This is something that we need to be focusing on and trying to address.
It's not a pretty picture. If you look at the different paths that computer scientists take, essentially the proportion of women just successively shrinks at every stage. So however few CS majors there are even fewer software engineers. There become even fewer very senior software engineers, even fewer founders of companies.
We have got to figure out a way to make the pipeline of tech talent more robust. And in order to do that, we have to look at communities that, until this point, have really been overlooked and underutilized. This means that we have to ensure that people of color are part of this tech talent pipeline. We have to ensure that women and girls are part of this tech talent pipeline. We have to ensure that we're looking in all corners and crannies of the nation to make sure that we're reaching people who have the talent, need the skill, need the context for being able to succeed.
I don't believe coding can be the great equalizer because there's so many things that we have to fix. But it is a medium towards equality. Good morning. How you doing? We believe that the reason that there's a gap is actually related to some really real structural factors. Part of that is people's ability to step away from their life to learn this skill. We had 425 applications. We asked folks to talk in that application about how they saw themselves as part of a community that was underrepresented in the tech movement, and then talk about how they would use apps to improve the condition of those communities. I'll show you a shortcut. So all of them are people of color. 9 of 12 are women. We have someone from a reservation. We've got folks who are LGBT, and most of them did not go to college. All right, so welcome back. We had a big week last week, right? Fun. I actually worked in social justice work and community organizing and activism for a lot of years. And one of the things I found is that I kept hiring really smart women, people of color, et cetera, to the same kind of low-level jobs, when really they had fantastic ideas about tech and how we could do what we were doing much better. I built a lot of our own software and tech on the fly just because I had a programming background. And I thought we should do something about that situation, and that the folks that all of this kind of work is trying to reach out to, the communities it's trying to impact, those people should be the people who are making decisions and making tools and being part of the actual design, rather than just the users and consumers of technology. Code is mobility. And, racial minority groups, women, poor folks have always fought to have access to those conduits towards power.
Tonight, the Crimson controversy, seeing red at Harvard University.
On the most prestigious college campus in the country, Harvard President Larry Summers floated the idea that when it comes to math and science, there may be an innate difference between men and women. MIT biology professor Nancy Hopkins, who studies genetics, was so offended she walked out.
When you send this message that maybe it's in your genes, you're asking women to come to work every day and prove over and over and over, yes, I really am good enough to be here. And that is exhausting.
What is the problem, though, with the precise words that Dr. Summers used? Do you dispute the fact that innate differences may play a role in why women are underrepresented at the top levels of math and science faculty?
I think there's no question there are differences between women and men. But when we use the word innate, then we move into a different arena. I do find it interesting that in all sorts of fields, women are now more represented than in the past. Did we all of a sudden become innately more capable? Or does this have to do with the circumstances? Does this have to do with plain old discrimination?
In neuroscience, we have no reason to think that there's anything about a male brain or female brain that makes it different in terms of its potential. Now, that said, if an individual or a group of individuals is better at programming, then that has to be coming from the brain. The big mistake people make is assuming that if it's coming from the brain, then it somehow must be innate. Because we know from decades and decades of neuroscience research that the brain, both its function and even its structure, are powerfully influenced by experience.
I don't believe that there's any difference between the male and female brain that would make one gender be more successful at programming than the other. If you start at the beginning with exactly the same IQ, male and female, they would end up given the same schooling with the same ability to code.
Boys and girls are treated differently from birth by their parents, by their teachers, by their peers. So imagine by the time you look at a bunch of college students, they've had not just weeks or hours of training, but 20 years of their brain being trained by experience. There will be differences in their brains. But what doesn't make sense is a lot of people then conclude that those differences somehow were genetically predetermined when we know that experience can produce those changes.
They see a game, right? They don't think, oh, I'm learning programming or oh, I'm learning how to code and I'm gonna decide to play this game because I'm a girl or I'm a boy. They just see a fun game. The biggest hindrance for them to start learning logic and programming logic and to think computationally was the syntax. So we removed the necessity of syntax, we added symbols. Everything is very abstract, and so they don't need to know how to read, they don't even need to speak English in order to start learning programming with Codable. We need more girls, we need more women interested in programming, but we need more people interested in programming in general. We don't have enough, we don't have nearly enough. So we wanted to make something that was fun, whether you were a boy or a girl, something that would boost your interest in programming and give you the skills to be able to learn it later in life.
All children are so talented and so creative, so as these tools become less expensive and more available and more embedded in class and more kids get exposed at earlier ages, they'll be able to make and affect the world around them.
Computer science should be a requirement in all U.S. public schools and charter schools and private schools, but we're paying our tax dollars. And as an employer, I'm not getting what I need from U.S. public schools because computer science is not being taught. The biggest problem we have is equipping enough teachers of computer science. Because it has not been required or even present, we do not have enough teachers. who are trained to teach the curriculum.
Schools can be technology rich but curriculum poor. And that what is really needed is the curriculum and the teachers and the opportunities to experiment and explore with the technology.
Most students have no exposure to programming as a young person. And I think that if it was done well and part of the curriculum, really creating technology, innovating, giving them the tools that they actually can create things that are meaningful and relevant to their lives, could have these other really positive effects.
People think that it's a specific subject when it's actually part of everything. It can be part of history, it can be part of English, it can be part of all of your subjects. Of course, we want to teach kids to read and to write, to express themselves, but we never let them express themselves in a mathematical, scientific way. So they need to be able to make things, they need to be able to do innovation, engineering, coding. That's all part of expression in the technical realm.
You see this game and then you just wonder, like, wow, how does someone make this? Like, maybe I want to try that too.
I like coding because instead of like us being consumers, we could be like a producer of it. So instead of us having to buy a game, we could make our own game.
I think the all-girl events really give the girls an environment where they feel comfortable, they feel supported, and they can really just be themselves, uniquely themselves, and really learn in this environment that's unencumbered by any stereotypes of what they can and can't do. And I think that's what really helps them to thrive.
Yeah, maybe we can break out into two groups, focus on those two problem statements, and start coming up with solutions.
Introducing girls to activities like being in a hackathon, which is something that's really endemic to the tech culture, and doing it in a way where they can, it's not just that they'll always hack with girls and only girls, but this really gives that seed of self-confidence, and that's what we're trying to do. Slowly change the ratio and the perception of what girls can do, and starting with themselves so then they can go back into the broader culture and really make a difference. We believe in really starting early in the pipeline and staying with our girls until they get through high school, and then hopefully decide to go to college and major in some type of technical career.
I've been thinking about some things in software engineering. I also have a couple startup ideas floating around in my head, so it'll depend on which one happens first.
Girls aren't really encouraged to pursue STEM careers in computer science, especially. A lot of times they're overlooked because, it's the boys that are good at science, and it's the boys that are taking apart computers at age 9. And so girls are just not encouraged to do that kind of stuff, and they're kind of pushed to the side when it comes to the heavy-duty tech. And I'm a perfect example of it. Like, I didn't even know what computer scientists did until my sophomore year of college. Having women in computer science and having African Americans in the industry, it just adds another layer of diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of perspective.
We need a balance. Different people and different perspectives are going to bring balance, and they're going to result in things being more well-rounded. And otherwise, you may end up with one perspective, and it's not going to be as beneficial to everybody.
The U.S. Transportation Department announced new rules for airbags to eliminate deaths attributed to them. In about 160 cases, airbags have been blamed for deaths.
Unfortunately, the first round of airbags killed a lot of women and children. And it turns out that the airbags were developed for the average specs of the engineer on the team. And those engineers happened to all be white men. And so airbags were not developed with women in mind, and as a result ended up killing a lot of people. And if you had had women on that team, you think that, hey, this airbag might kill me. I am not as tall as you are. I don't weigh as much as you do. My frame is not the same. That conversation would have happened.
So there's a long history across all sorts of fields that diversity is critically important if the innovations are going to positively impact all people. When the first voice recognition systems were designed, it was by men. They were using male voices to test it. And what ended up happening is that women could not be heard. Not only could women's voices not be heard, but then when they were doing voice recognition and video tracking, women could not be seen.
Back in the late 90s, we were putting a feature in all of the Office products, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that's called the Office Assistant. And it's an animated character that pops up and gives you help on what you're doing. And we did a bunch of focus group testing, and the results came back kind of negative. Most of the women thought the characters were too male and that they were leering at them. So we're sitting in a conference room, there's me and I think like 11 or 12 guys, and we're going through the results, and they said, I don't see it. I just don't know what they're talking about. And I said, guys, look, I'm a woman, and I'm gonna tell you, these animated characters are male looking. And you went and spent $100,000 on a focus group. You went and asked all these people, and you're just gonna discard all of this information? So we ended up shipping with 10 male characters and 2 female characters. And I just thought that was so instructive because they were ready to toss away data because they couldn't see it for themselves.
In computer science, important mantra is you are not your user. There's a narrative in this women in computer science story, which is saying men are gonna make mistakes if they're designing for women. And that we need women if women are gonna be using the tools. And I think that that is letting people off easy. Women aren't this magical sauce that we're gonna sprinkle on everybody and they're gonna think about their users. Every developer, every person who's designing needs to be thinking about their users.
To be a programmer, you have to do 2 things. You have to be able to think logically in an algorithm, step 1, step 2, step 3, either or, and or. But you also have to be able to translate real-world problems into a machine's language. So you can say, here's what we're trying to solve, and here are the steps to do it.
The electromechanical differential analyzer performs scientific and industrial marvels.
Grace Hopper was the first person who came up with the concept of real programming languages and compilers. And what she enabled was computers to be used in business, because now you could write more complex programs.
Captain Hopper is a whiz at mathematics. Some would say a genius. One of that small band of brothers and sisters who ushered in the computer revolution. And as far as we've progressed since this vacuum tube monster, Captain Hopper says, we ain't seen nothing yet.
You talk a lot about the computer revolution. I thought we're in it and it's over.
No, we're only at the beginning. We've been through the preliminaries.
Well, what's it going to be like?
We've got the Model T.
Grace Hopper had a piss and vinegar personality. She was like a great Navy person. She could curse with the best of them. And she ran that crew as if she were a Navy commander. She stays in the Navy the rest of her career. In fact, they keep extending her retirement because she's writing programming languages for the Navy all the way through.
People believe that she coined the term bug because of a moth that was found in the vacuum tube. So then they kept saying that they would have a bug in the system.
She was working on one of her early machines and found this moth. And in her lab notebooks from this period, we have this description of the very first computer bug, and it's taped right into the notebook. And debugging, of course, is one of the things that's so hard about programming. It never quite works the first time around, and the context is always changing. And so she's not just giving it a language, she's also really defining what is important and what's intellectually challenging and stimulating about programming.
When the first electronic computer was planned, it was estimated that there could never be a market for more than 2 or 3. Today, there are more than 5,000 computers.
in the 1950s and the early 1960s. Most estimates suggest at least 30% and as many as 50% of all programmers in this period would have been women. There's this wonderful article in the April 1967 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine. It's called The Computer Girls, and it's a description of the opportunities available to women in this computer industry. It's got quotes about style and fashion and dating, but it's this remarkably insightful piece on the fact that this is an industry open to women, that women are working in the industry, and that there are lots of opportunities for them to move forward. It's part of, I think, a confusing and conflicting set of messages that are beginning to emerge, however, about the role of women in computing. Companies like IBM are struggling to find programmers, and they'll put an advertisement in the New York Times and say, "Are you the man to control the electronic giant?" It's encouraging programmers, I think, to think about themselves as a special breed, somebody with the right stuff. Women aren't disappearing from computing, but the kinds of stories we tell about who belongs in this industry are very much starting to be about men.
If a girl has been told from the beginning that, oh, girls are good at art, girls are good at science, girls are good at math, then naturally, this is just not a field they're going to concentrate on. And as they get older, they'll naturally start to fall behind.
I think from a very young age, girls and boys are kind of told what they're supposed to like. I've gone shopping in toy aisles and I'll see these pink and girly toys, and then I'll see these cool like trucks and trains, but they're obviously marketed towards boys. So it's not that surprising to me that when girls get older, they don't gravitate towards the maths and sciences. I played with anything. I played with G.I. Joes, I played with Legos, I played with Barbies.
I love to shop, don't you? I can't believe my ears. I can't believe my eyes. Every teen talk Barbie is a different surprise. Cool. What you gonna say next? Do you like toasted marshmallows?
That's the kind of talk we expect from Barbie. Innocuous and upbeat. But here's the one-liner that got her into big trouble.
Math class is tough.
Math class is tough? Mighty discouraging words from a female role model.
Hi guys, it's Barbie.
Mom Helen Jane Hearn says she was excited to share the book Barbie, I Can Be a Computer Engineer with her two young girls, until she opened it up.
We were shocked.
The book starts with Barbie designing a computer game, but she quickly gets into trouble, a virus crashing her laptop. Her solution? Bring in the boys. It will go faster if Brian and I help, says Steven. Barbie's reply? Great. The boys fix the problem. And after a high-five celebration, Barbie proudly proclaims, I guess I can be a computer engineer.
Mattel is now apologizing for a children's book that is getting a lot of criticism.
When I first started out, a lot of people in the toy industry told me that the concept of getting girls interested in engineering, computer science was very niche, that it would never go mainstream, that girls like dolls and boys like building. I didn't believe it for a second, but I needed to prove them wrong. Construction toys have been around for over 100 years, but for a long time they've really been kind of designed for and marketed to boys, which is unfortunate because they're really educational. They help develop motor and spatial skills and problem solving. Young kids are so impressionable at that age. It's really important that we open up their minds to more options, especially girls who are inundated with princesses and ponies and pop stars. We've been thinking a lot about Goldie Blocks as a way to get girls interested in engineering and technology through these characters, because you need to have a role model, right? Somebody who you can look up to and want to be like. I remember the moment when I watched the Super Bowl ad. it just brought tears to my eyes. Watching that kind of horde of little girls racing down the streets with their pink toys and building a rocket ship, it was so incredibly empowering, particularly given the fact that typically in the Super Bowl, you're seeing, big boobs and cars and, a lot of kind of typically sexist content. To see a girl empowerment ad, it was really disruptive.
My mom was also a mathematician, and I grew up with the term stereotype threat just casually thrown around the household. But there's some pretty legitimate research showing that if you think you're gonna be less good at something, you'll start being less good at it.
There are all kinds of forms of stereotype threat, because there's negative stereotypes about almost every single identity we have, our age, our race, our religion. But if you're, say, for example, a woman trying to succeed in advanced computer science courses at an elite university, the prospect of being seen in terms of the negative stereotype about women's math ability can sort of knock you sideways. We got men and women who were very, very good at math. And we brought them into the laboratory and we gave them a very difficult math test that we knew would cause frustration. Our idea was that for these students, the situation would become different for men than it was for women. For men, they'd be frustrated and worried that they weren't performing as well as they might have anticipated. But for women, in addition to that, they might have worried that they're maybe confirming that alleged limitation in math ability that stereotypes in our society attribute to women. That extra worry will use up an extra amount of bandwidth as they fight with that and resolve to push through that and to disprove that and all the things that we do. Women performed a full standard deviation worse than men on a test, even though we had carefully matched the men and women for having the same skill level when they began. We do the experiment over again, but this time we tell them, look, you may have heard that women don't do as well as men on difficult standardized math tests, but that's not true for the test you're taking today. For the test you're taking today, women always do as well as men. They always have, they always will. Under that simple instruction, women's math performance went up to match that of equally skilled men.
Even though women may do well in many of these subjects in school, there's this idea that you have to be a genius or have a certain kind of mind to succeed in that as a field. Women who have this view that it's only a fixed kind of person who belongs there start feeling the stereotype more strongly. They don't choose a field that says it's sheer brain power that can't be taught. Some people have it, some don't, because they know who the field thinks doesn't have it.
After 87 minutes of very competitive play, we have a tie. In the event of a tie, we move into a sudden death round. Each team is given the opportunity to choose their opponent. North Shore, who do you select?
The girl, dude, the girl. Contestant Kraft.
For Marymount, Ms. Carolyn Kraft.
We picked the girl, too.
You're just a woman with a small brain, with a brain a third the size of us. It's science.
Red is my favorite color, and then ruby is the stuff I'm using.
Ah, isn't that a cool photo? See all these, all this stuff? That's like what I'm doing in code. So every time I click on it, that something, it changes.
Did you have to type all of this?
Yeah, most of it. So it's kind of,
it's an exposure.
I would be willing to learn it. It sounds so interesting. In high school, they'll introduce it to you?
No, they don't even do it in high school. They do it in like your senior year or whatever, which is way too late.
So they don't, and some people are not interested in it.
Yeah, and most people like who go to computer science in college, they've been coding and programming since they were 10.
Yeah.
Like
and so,
full websites and things.
I took this Java coding course at Berkeley, and it was so intense. Like, it was supposed to be a beginner course, and it was all like 16-year-old guys who obviously already knew what they were doing.
Were you intimidated because it was all like mostly male, or were you intimidated because of the level that they were at?
Well, it's mostly the level they're at. Plus, I was like this 12-year-old little girl with all these older guys, and I have like no idea what I was doing. So tiny. A lot of girls go into like college level courses and they feel so behind. It's not that they're necessarily behind, it's just that they haven't been learning as long as some of the other students and boys. Also, like computer scientists and software engineers, I think it's the most sought after job in the world right now. And especially they're also looking for like female coders and things, and they're like so hard to find.
So when did you decide you wanted to create a website?
I've been thinking about doing this since I was about 11, but then I actually started doing this kind of like, I think it was at the start of 8th grade.
How did you get the idea?
Well, my dad, because I'm in at his work all the time.
Yeah.
I see all these ninja coders, and they're so
like
ninja.
inspired.
Yeah, and they're not weird. Like you can like, they'll talk to you.
They're actual people.
Yeah. And they like talk to you, and I've had like some great conversations with someone. They're like totally normal. They're like, they don't all wear glasses. Like they're totally normal.
Like a stereotype.
Yeah, and so I was like, oh my god, these guys are so cool. I want to be like them.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, they were mostly men, but I was like, that's fine, because I can just be a queen ninja.
I have a niece who was always great in math, all the way through elementary school, junior high school. And in high school, all of a sudden, she's not good at math anymore. And it's much more around she doesn't want to be seen as being the smart girl. She doesn't, it's all of those pressures. They want to be the cute girl, the popular girl, not the nerdy girl.
Oh, I never wanted to be the cute girl, the popular girl.
A lot of girls do though, right?
I know.
Girls start to associate math and science as not being something they want to be associated being good at. They don't want to be thought bad at math, they just want to be average.
I'm totally lost. Can you help me? But I wasn't lost.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what Ms. Norbury was talking about.
It's a factorial, so you multiply each one by n.
Wrong. Is that the summation?
Yeah, they're the same thing.
Wrong. He was so wrong. Thanks. I get it now.
In school, there's a big difference between what a woman is going through and what a man is going through. Now, it's hopefully changed a little bit, but when I was in college, there were 5 to 10% women in my classes, especially my computer science classes. And what that meant was the guys actually all teamed up on the homework. We'd all be in the same room. They'd be working on it, figure out the little sort of tricks that were embedded in everything, and share it with each other. And they wouldn't even talk to me. I mean, I couldn't really do anything else. I loved it so much I wasn't going to give it up, but there was definitely, it was a pretty hard path.
I went to MIT. There really weren't too many people in my class freshman year who were that interested in computers, boys or girls. So it was kind of unusual to be taking the first computer class for anyone. That class probably had one girl in it, which was me. And the next class, it increased a lot by then. We had 2 women in it. I was told by many professors that I would never make it in industry, and a woman should just as well go home and have babies. I was really wasting my time. I was lectured in a math class, singled out for having done my homework, and lectured that women are inferior because they always do what they're told. That's not terribly pleasant when you're 18.
I was not aware or focused on my gender in high school. The top performers in my math and science classroom in high school were women. It didn't feel strange there. But then when I went to college, all of a sudden I was receiving these messages that it was strange that I was a woman, interested in math and science, interested in computer science. Colleen, you won't like majoring in computer science. You won't like sitting in a basement coding until 3 in the morning. It seemed like every adult in my life between the ages, when I was the age 18 to 22, was telling me that same thing. And it wasn't until I was a senior in college where I found out that that wasn't something that my male colleagues were being told.
There started to be an increase of the number of women who were studying computer science, and in the mid-'80s, it peaked around 40%. And I thought when I entered college around that time that we were on our way to being 50-50 because it was steadily going up. It's odd that we could have gotten close to gender parity in people studying computer science in the 80s and then have it decline from there.
It's when the idea of the nerd genius came to the fore, and that's exactly when women started declining in their representation. This whole image form of, do you have the right stuff to be a coder, a computer programmer, a computer geek?
And what this does is create this kind of culture of computing that today we know as computer hacking. In the 70s, it was called, they were called the computer bums. They would hang around in these labs and drink Coke and eat lots of sugar and stay up for days at a time. In the early 1980s, we start to get this new figure emerging in American popular culture, often called the computer hacker or the computer nerd. These are emerging out of incidents in which young male computer programmers break into other systems.
Anybody want to shut down the Federal Reserve?
Los Alamos Labs, Security Pacific Bank. And they're wonderful stories. They're romantic stories. They're stories that embody a certain kind of thrill and danger. And being young, being male, potentially being slightly antisocial or countercultural, becomes part of the stories we tell about who belongs and who doesn't.
Deja vu!
Ray Sanchez, you're under arrest under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986.
¡La computadora de mierda! ¡Que te dije que no estés jugando con esa computadora de mierda! What are you waiting for? Arrest me already!
Are those your grades?
Yep. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can go to jail for that.
Only if you're over 18.
There are many ways to demonstrate that you're a good programmer. Pranking your friends, breaking into their system is maybe an adolescent male way of showing your dominance. The display of pornography, later of video games in these labs that are closed places, I think create both an environment that's unfriendly for female students, but also this idea that that's what hackers do. So if you're a startup firm and you want to signal that you've got the right stuff, you may not have a business plan, you may not have a product, but you've got a certain kind of culture. And so this celebration of nerd culture, in a sense, becomes a way of signaling your abilities.
When I started, the stereotypical programmer was sort of like I was probably close to that, which is kind of quiet, kind of shaggy looking.
What I've seen is that somebody that really doesn't care about their appearance and they just want to come in late and stay late and wear free t-shirts. I think that's my stereotype.
Maybe more antisocial than usual. Drinks a lot of caffeinated beverages.
Like at one point in one of the jobs I had, some guy actually thought I, didn't have a home and tried to, like one of the sales guys thought I needed money. That's for sure was stereotypical, but maybe not actually typical. Probably not a programmer, right? Like I don't think that counts as a programmer.
Programmer. What in fact is a programmer?
Probably the traditional stereotype, right? Is someone who's socially awkward and, stays down in the basement, never sees the light of day. Then you have the programmer who is, kind of your frat style, kind of really type A, macho.
I can teach you how to go from programmer to brogrammer in just 10 easy steps. Number 10, the workout.
There's a lot of cartoons on the internet with guys, lifting weights and wearing bandanas and glasses and sometimes looking a little pretentious.
I think the sort of phenomenon of the programmer has really interested me because it definitely seems like initially it wasn't necessarily that there were programmers, a sort of combination of frat boy and like intelligent geek that was super fun, and they'd hang out and party and drink from the kegs all of the time and find the attractive women, and like there's just sort of a heteronormative frat boy kind of feel to the entire thing. And I think it's interesting because I don't think it really arose with them existing. I think it arose as an attempt to try to make computer science cool.
You need to completely change who you are, Richard. A complete tectonic shift has to happen.
Tectonic.
What?
A tectonic shift is the Earth's crust moving around. Teutonic, which is what you just said, is an ancient Germanic tribe that fought the Romans.
Stop it. You're being a complete tool right now. I need you to be a complete asshole. Do you understand the difference? If you're not an asshole, this company dies.
I think culturally in some places, there's so many male programmers that there becomes this sort of culture that sometimes for women it's really hard to get into. And it's one thing if you think, well, I just have to survive this class, or I have to survive 4 years in college, and it's gonna be better on the other side. But when you get to the other side and you're suddenly in this place where you're gonna spend 8 or 10 or 12 hours, and you're sort of being mistreated by the people who are supposed to be your team, I think that can be very difficult to sort of work through.
Little things that oftentimes, if I were to bring them up to somebody, not in the situation, they would say, that was nothing, like, why can't you just brush it off? But when it happens every day or every week, and it all adds up, off-the-cuff remarks about, oh, maybe you should try being a recruiter, or maybe you should try being a product manager, or maybe you should try something else that's not exactly what you do because maybe you don't look like what I expect. The assumption is that I would not be a software engineer, which is actually what I do. Makes me feel like I'm a little bit out of place, or that they expect that I wouldn't be a good software engineer.
I've been doing this for a long time, and so I'll walk into, let's say, a sales meeting or a customer gathering somewhere, and I'll be there as customers start to arrive. I can always tell from body language and from the way that people react that when they get there and I greet them at the table and greet them at the door, that they think that I'm just the cute girl checking them in at the front. And then when the program starts and I'm the second or third speaker up and I get up there and I start talking about architectures and I'm talking about software, it's so much fun. It's one of the most fun moments that I have in those events, because all of a sudden people who are like, oh, what's she coming up to talk about, start doing this, you know, like, wow.
It's not being heard in a meeting or having someone else repeat the same thing I've said. I definitely have felt effects of people seeing my leadership and seeing and feeling uncomfortable with it. I've been called the intimidator by male leadership at previous companies.
Even now, when I work with male programmers and things like that, they'll often ask me oh, so you're teaching this whole thing, but have you ever coded anything? Which to me is kind of an odd question, right? Well, how would I teach it if I hadn't? But there's this assumption there that I brought the coffee.
One friend told me a story of her male coworkers sharing pornography in the IRC channel where they were all working, and when she confronted them about it, they told her to stop being such a girl.
The tech world and the tech culture will be so much better for everyone when there are more women in the room. The problem is it's hard to, with a good conscience, encourage more women to come into an environment that will sexually harass them and not fund them.
What you're about to hear will likely offend you. It's part of a presentation by Australian programmers on stage at one of the tech world's largest and most influential conferences. Again, you may find this offensive.
G'day guys, we're from Sydney, Australia, and we're here to bring you
Tit Stare.
Tit Stare?
Tit Stare is an app where you take photos of yourself staring at tits.
Why, Dave? Why?
Well, I'll tell you, Jethro. It's science, my good friend. Science.
Science?
Did you know that looking at breasts is directly linked with a good, healthy heart?
So what's the problem, Dave?
Well, women just aren't that warm to it.
Oh.
It's the most titillating fun you can have.
Thanks.
That was an app dreamed up during an overnight hackathon and presented to an audience of 500. The creators later said it was a parody. The fratty culture that results is getting a lot more attention lately, as these incidents happen so publicly. A firestorm forced out the Business Insider site's chief technology officer on Tuesday after his bigoted and sexist Twitter feed got wide notice.
Next, what were you tweeting?
I maybe didn't take Tit Stare seriously, I guess. I thought it was a joke, and I just trivialized it. And I guess, I didn't see it that way. Maybe from my experiences, it wasn't a big deal. I had always treated Twitter as sort of a game. I think I am responsible for giving people the wrong impression of me. And that's my bad. And it's not a freedom of speech issue because, I didn't get in trouble with the government. I'm working for a company. I'm free to say what I want, and they're free to not employ me. And I sort of dug my own hole there. I created an impression of me that wasn't true, and I paid the price for it.
I don't think women are motivated to join a male-dominated industry. I think it's very evident that that battle is uphill. I love being a maker. I love making things, and I love that I can have an idea, and if I make a website for it, it exists. For the first 5 years of my career, I thought that this gender discrimination and the attitude towards women were just a normal thing that I had to put up with because I was career-oriented. It's not normal. Everyone, men and women, deserve a safe place to work. And they deserve respect. If you hire someone onto your team, they deserve the respect from everyone on your team. Males tend to project their nerd girl fantasies onto any woman that they can in this industry, and it makes it really hard for women to be seen as professionals, because as soon as a woman gets introduced into the environment, it's like fucking blood in the water. Every guy is like, and I've watched this happen.
Gentlemen, welcome to the big show. TechCrunch motherfucking disrupt.
Okay, guys, this place is a vortex of distraction. Normally the tech world is 2% women. Guys, these next 3 days, 15%.
It's a goddamn meat market.
So I was hired as the, I think, 62nd employee at GitHub overall, but I was GitHub's first female designer developer, and at the time, the only woman on any technical team at GitHub. While the culture was really supportive of women in general, like women were really supportive of each other, not having that support on the technical teams and inside of the technical discussions was a huge problem. You know, at first, there was this reaction that felt like it was validating, like it felt like people were actually listening. The longer I was there, the more I started seeing sort of overt sexism pop up in ways that I wasn't comfortable with. A really good example of this was when I was just like, I'm done. I walked downstairs and there's just like a line of dudes sitting back on this bench and watching two girls hula hoop. I get it, like I understand what's happening here, but it looks like a strip club and it's making me uncomfortable. And I brought that up to a male friend, and he got so pissed at me because I told him, if you're sitting there saying nothing or you're participating in that type of behavior, you're part of the problem. And that's why so many women leave tech. That feeling of being that woman, the woman who speaks up, you know, is she nagging? Is she this or is she that?
Within an hour, not even an hour, someone had posted on this anonymous app, the self-proclaimed queen of GitHub is leaving her throne, the masses cheer.
It seemed really petty, but I think what hurt me the most was that I knew it had to have been someone from my company because my team was the only people in the world that knew I was leaving. They were trying to collect information to assassinate my character and really make sure that I couldn't work again or something. And so that's really what pushed me, like it pushed me over the edge.
So there's a lot of things like this on the internet. Like someone wrote a blog post, ousted by this cunt, and it's just calling me a cunt. I think I'll get this one framed. It was pretty scary. I mean, I grew up in the hood, so internet nerds don't scare me. Like 4chan people don't scare me, you know, famous last words. But, you know, someone tweeted at me that they were gonna rape me and my whole family, and they put my old apartment address on Twitter. But then I kind of had to snap out of it and say, this is just internet trolls. And, you know, I still had friends living at that address, and it was scary. And I had to call them and tell them, you know, be on the lookout and that kind of thing. It's so intentionally to hurt me. It's not trolling. It's, I want to hurt you. And sometimes that's physically. Being excellent or being good at your job isn't enough if you're a woman in tech. And men are like, holy shit, this stuff happens? But how does anyone know if no one talks about it? Because that's the lie we're all told our entire lives, is that we have an equal opportunity independent of our skin color, of our race, of our religion. We're told this, but that's not actually the case once you get there. All women said the same thing once they get to that point. You know, they're saying, I just want to build stuff, I just want to build stuff, until they hit that wall. And then someone starts treating them unfairly because they're a woman, or, you know, harassing them, or whatever it is. It's not until that moment that you see why there's such a reaction to sexism in tech.
I know a lot of girls and a lot of guys are on their phones, but they're not thinking, how does that work? How did you do that? They're just thinking, oh, someone else is gonna make it. They're not thinking, oh, maybe I can create that too, or I can make the next big thing. Well, most people say, that's a guy job. That's what guys do. Guys are smarter than girls. And most girls these days, they're just like, oh, math, I hate math and I'm not good at math, or same with science. They're not pushing themselves or trying to look out for new opportunities.
The thing is that once they said, oh, women can't do this because men can do it better, that lowers their confidence and they pass it on to the next generation and throughout. So if we change that now, it'll be a lot different later. Ever since I was little, I always thought to myself, I want to grow up and inspire other women to change the world someday. I thought it would be fun to have a new experience, and my family is always having problems with technology, so I try and see how it is I can help.
Nicely done.
I probably see myself working at a software company or something with a lot of technology, because I like to explore things. And the thing that I always remember to keep me going, you give it 1,000% and above.
I'm most likely gonna go into computer science. Hopefully I'm able to help with the next big thing that's coming.
I believe anybody can learn to code. The things that they're gonna need to be able to learn is different. I was the first person in my family to decide they wanted to go to college for the purpose of a job, etc. So when I was growing up, it really wasn't kind of a situation where anyone was like, oh, you know, you could be a programmer. As someone who studied rocket science, I can tell you that coding is not rocket science. But people can learn. And I think women reserve the right to make nerdy Star Trek-y things too, you know. But the kinds of things that when our folks apply to our program, we ask them, what is an app that you might make that addresses a social need in your community? So if I do the opening and the closing and you want to do the people's names, like that's doable. And look, minority communities are not a charity, right? We're a market, we're an electorate, so think about the fact that it may actually really help you get a better product. You can do it, right? If you want to do it, don't ask permission. Find some folks who really want to invest in you and teach you and do it. You can. We are told from a small age about who founded this country, but we learn over the rest of our lives who built it. This is our country, our cities, our communities, our children, our code. So now the work begins. You're in our hearts.
These are great jobs, and women really deserve to have access to them. My message to other universities is that, first of all, it's not that hard to get more women into computer science. Make your intro courses appealing, interesting, and not scary. Encourage students after they've taken the intro course to take the next course. And you have to make sure that the classroom environments are going to be supportive.
We can give variables values, like I can give A the value 3.
That first semester computer science course across the board is going to be really important in terms of shaping the diversity in your computer science major. At MUD, every student is required to take computer science in their first semester. And part of what I think is great about the course is that it's not just one thing. It's about the title. It's about the first 5 words you say on the first day. It's about the gender makeup in the room. It's about what the first homework assignment is like. It's about what the structure is for getting help. It's about the attitude towards failure presented in the class. There are all these things that are shaping whether or not a computer science class is a welcoming environment or not.
It's not particularly more expensive to do any of this. It's just a question of being consistent and realizing that it's not going to happen overnight. So if you stop paying attention, it'll go away again. But if you care about it and you persist, you will see the numbers increase.
I'm a grad student at Mills College. My program formally is education leadership, but I'm actually supplementing it with a post-bac in computer science.
If compare result is less than 0, it does this.
I've always been a nerd. When I was a kid, I grew up kind of like taking apart computers and reconfiguring settings and stuff like that. Growing up, I was actually a system kid, so I bounced around a lot. But one of the homes that I was in for a long time, we actually were lucky enough to have computers. Until I got here, I didn't know that I could learn how to code like so quickly. I just didn't think I had the background. I thought it was something that would take, years, and I just didn't know I could do it. For me, the turning point was when I got my first GUI on the screen. A GUI is a graphic user interface. So I think like the first time I got like a GUI to appear, just like coding, I was like, oh my God, I can do this. So I'm coding alongside women who are gonna go out and join the workforce and join the ranks, and it's like we kind of know each other, we have that camaraderie, we have that relationship, so I think that that's really important. We're kind of building like a little mafia here of like women in code and women in computer science.
So why do you think there aren't more women computer scientists?
That's a really good question, and I would love to know the answer when you guys find out. I'm the kind of person that when I like something, I do it. I went to MIT. I did not think I was going to be in computer science. I was the kind of girl that didn't really know how to work a DVD player, and so I was like, I could never be a software engineer. And I had to take a class that was just kind of a basic Java for engineering classes, and I really liked it, so I ended up switching to a math CS major. I think people are sometimes surprised when I tell them I work in computer science, just because it is a male-dominated industry. We're all first and foremost athletes here, and I feel like I fit right in because I've been a runner since I was born. I can relate to people who understand that being active is an important part of your life and that it's okay to go out and take an hour to run during the middle of the day because it means you're going to be that much more productive when you come back. The computer science culture that I experience is what I get down here. And I think that's probably different from what you get in a lot of places. That's the argument for the twos.
What was that?
It seems pretty easy. We all work on teams. We all contribute to code equally. So it's very rare that you find yourself working with a code base all by yourself.
The API endpoint when we load the profile?
Computer science kind of lets you go into any industry. I could work in nutrition. I could work in environmental. I can do whatever I want because there's so much demand for software engineers out there. Definitely takes a more technical mind, but I think anyone can do anything they set their mind to. If they're determined, they'll do it.
If we wait for the next generation, that's not generally been a very successful approach to change. It was only my second job in New York, and I was like, wow, there are so many different people here. This whole company just feels so mixed and wonderful. And then I went to the engineering, and I was like, oh, it's all white guys again. Like, here we go again. And we came up with this idea about how to try and encourage more women to join that engineering department.
first initiative, as I understand it, was supplying grants for women to attend hacker school for the summer. Etsy started that in the summer of 2012, and that was the batch that I attended. From there was enormous growth in the number of female engineers at Etsy.
Our tech group is made up of 31% women. I've seen a number of managers take steps to make sure that our interview panels are super diverse and that the female engineers we're interviewing aren't just like the culture slot. And also, we talk a lot about how we retain women here, so we don't just focus on the pipeline problem. I don't think it's that difficult to hire more women coders. I go to a lot of conferences, I meet a lot of women. They're all qualified and they're all amazing, and I want them all to come work for us. Having more women here has made the line for the bathroom a lot longer, but I think that that's an okay difference than other startups.
I asked my male coworkers, what do you think of having females on a team? And they said, we're happier. They don't want to be a part of something that's backwards, and they don't want to not have the best people around them.
We acknowledged the problem. We devoted really a lot of money and resources and time to it, and we got a lot of very good response as a result of that. I think what we did was good, but to me, the next step is to say, real substantial change in the industry has to come from there being women in leadership roles in the industry. You have to be impatient. This has to happen now. We have to do what we can now. Whatever it takes to move the number now, we have to do that now.
41% of women in tech will leave by the 10-year mark versus 17% for men. A lot of women feel like around mid-career that their career trajectories are slowing down and their growth is stalling, as opposed to many men who around mid-career are starting to see their careers accelerate. Yes, we do need to get more women going through the pipeline, and there's a lot to be done in terms of keeping women in industry once they're already there.
We're on a path that's unstoppable, and you guys and we, the techies, are a big part of that. One of the big things that we just have to keep doing is keep demanding and pushing. You know, that's how all change happens. And we really have a culture problem in technology. What I see as a death by 1,000 cuts from all the unconscious bias that lives around us. And I'm hopeful, because I think that the tech industry could move the fastest of all the industries. That's how we roll, and that's what we could do. If we see the problem, we can debug it, and I encourage us to do that.
For the digital revolution to truly be great and to transform this world, it's got to be inclusive. It's got to have women, it's got to have people of color. It can't just be for a certain set of people. Most of the role models are now historical role models, people like Grace Hopper. We need more modern heroes, girls who code, who are famous, who can hold their own in the hackathon world, and we need to celebrate them more.
It's not gender parity for the sake of gender parity. I truly believe that the lack of coding access for women is the most important domestic issue of our country's time. We have seen girls who have literally lifted their families out of poverty because they've gotten access to coding, and they're now making websites or being the first in their families to get out of public housing and getting a job at Twitter or eBay or Square. And we've also seen girls that come from the best private schools in America that have no access to computer science and who have fallen in love with this.
Companies like Facebook are in a real position to change the perspective. I think, you know, if I think of products that teenage girls use and love, I hope Facebook's high on that list. And I hope that they're inspired to think that Facebook is the kind of thing that is made by people like them. It's not just made by Mark Zuckerberg. I guarantee you that the women engineers of Facebook have contributed far more code to Facebook than Mark has. There are many, many more of us. I want girls to think of it as something that is made by teams of men and women working together, that they could contribute to, that they could create.
The farther into the future we get, the more things are going to be based on code. If you stick with code and you find the other things that you like, you can ride coding into that career. It isn't that coding is a career, it is a zillion careers.
Computer science is becoming mandatory in many countries. We're working to get the US to that point. New Zealand, South Korea, Israel, Estonia, the UK, those are all countries who are teaching computer science to every child in their country.
I actually think that this is an issue where we can learn from other countries. India's ahead of us, Nigeria's ahead of us, Cambodia's ahead of us, Cuba's ahead of us, Vietnam's ahead of us, China's ahead of us. These countries get it, and they are educating their women in these fields.
There's a bunch of countries who are ahead of us, and we'll kind of run to catch up and hopefully move fast.
Code. Debugging the gender gap.